Hello.
Hello.
You win the prize for having the best setup and a very professional microphone. So thank you so much.
Excellent. I was hoping I would win that one today.
Well, it's not a prize we give out freely, so congratulations. So extra parts to your title because you are an esteemed fellow that's joining us today. So not only are you a digital anthropologist and futurist, but you're also a best-selling author and global innovation evangelist now at Salesforce. So thank you very much, Brian Solis, for joining us. Now, interestingly, I know we're going to talk about some broader kind of customer engagement and innovation topics, but you were one of the very first. I'm not trying to blow smoke up your ass here, but you were one of the very first people. You were one of the very first people that I followed on Twitter. You joined in November 2006. You got over 250,000 followers. So you have seen, whether you like it or not, the evolution of social media and Twitter over the intervening 15 years. I mean, just give us, if you can, Brian, your kind of general observations on how social media has evolved to where it is now from where it was back in those Wild West days, which is a phrase that I've been using a lot on the previous session, but I think it's a fair one.
It's certainly fair, and it continues to be the Wild West. And look, just for everybody who's watching, the background is that in the early days of social media, I was part of a real smart, small group of thinkers who were imagining a new world before it was even called social media. We were advising a lot of the Web 2.0 startups, which was sort of the precursor to what would become social. And we were entertaining all of the possibilities and advising all of the early founders, for many of whom have become the people you now know as the founders of a lot of these big networks. A lot of them didn't make it. And the thing that we all realized was that we wanted to champion social media for the power of good. There was a book back in the day called The Clue Train Manifesto, written by a lot of really good friends. Doc Searles being the one that I'm going to cite here. I think there were 5 authors, but Doc originally wanted to call social media the live web. And it was basically this idea that markets were conversations, that it was a democratized opportunity for people to get together, and including businesses and organizations and governments, to sort of democratize engagement and collaborate around a brighter, more equal future. And what ended up happening, though, was that it was exciting. That power was incredible. You know, I was said back then that the great thing about social media was that it gave everyone a voice. The bad thing was that it gave everyone a voice. To quote Spider-Man, his uncle, which was, with social media comes great responsibility. So I wrote in 2007, and I promise there's a point to this, the Social Media Manifesto. Which was this document spread worldwide around how we could use it for good, and how businesses could create stronger community ties with their customers, how customers could create stronger ties with businesses and help shape products and services. That listening was powerful, that it could transform businesses into what I called social businesses, to be much more part of the community rather than, at the time, which was a traditional top-down broadcast. Those with the most money could control the conversation. And so with that said, it was a dramatic, it was an accelerated, it was a powerful shift in the landscape of influence. And we're still, after all these years, trying to figure it out.
Indeed. Right. Okay. So thank you for that. I mean, how do you think brands are considering not only their social strategy, but, just if we put it into the wider context of customer experience and innovation? I mean, where are the heads of brands these days when it comes to that?
I think, honestly, social media itself was underappreciated and also underestimated by businesses early on, and still is. The best companies totally understand its power. This is why we've seen this incredible rise of influence. D2C brands really understand it. What I think the mistake that most businesses made in every single industry early on was that social was just this toy or this gimmick or this thing that the kids did, and most businesses, really wanted to focus on the executives wanted to focus on the more important, crucial channels like customer service and IVRs and engaging customers in ways that absolutely didn't make their days. So it was always understaffed, budgeted, and still, to the most part, for the most part, it is underappreciated today. Look, I think the reality is, as my former colleague Charlene Lee and I wrote in our book on building a social business, was that it was actually and still is an opportunity to learn from trends, learn from passions, learn from what people don't love, and also an opportunity to be part of those conversations, to build relationships in ways that a loyalty program, for example, can't. And to be a brand that's seen as being part of the community. There's no mistake that Steakums, a frozen food item, has one of the most compelling Twitter accounts today because it's just using social in a way that it's meant to be. Not that every brand has to go out and be absolutely witty and clever out there, but it does show that when you let go of rules and you suspend disbelief, that you can actually reimagine what community building and engagement looks like. And I think that's really the power of social media. It's gone a far off the rails though since then, but I think what we need
Indeed.
is true leadership.
So, Brian, if we can shift gears a little bit now, then. So, your specialist areas these days are in digital transformation, customer experience, and innovation generally in companies. How does customer experience and digital transformation kind of combine now? I mean, where are we in 2021 with the digital transformation of e-commerce and how it relates to customer engagement? If it is a moment in time that is noteworthy.
Well, certainly this is a moment in time that is noteworthy, and what we've seen. Look, if we want to even focus it here on hospitality and travel,
Mm-hmm.
what we've seen is a customer who's become by default digital first. We always knew digital was becoming more and more prevalent, going back to, I mean, Amazon launched, I think it was what, 1994,
Correct.
and many retailers are still trying to figure out how to compete against Amazon. Uh, the reality is that because digital transforms us as human beings, right? Social media gave us a voice, it empowered us, but so did the app economy, so did DoorDash and Uber. It turned us all into accidental narcissists. And with the pandemic, it accelerated that transformation in ways that I can't even begin to define. It's my whole year of research has been dedicated to how people have changed, and also then as a result, how do businesses need to change in order to deliver uh, touch points and ultimately experiences that meet these subconscious needs that the digital customer now has. We're on the cusp, we're light at the end of the tunnel where all of this travel is going to start blowing up. And if executives don't take the time to answer the questions, how did my customers change and how can I deliver better experiences in this new world, then they're going to miss the opportunity of all of this disruption.
Your research is ongoing, but what are some of the conclusions that you have come to so far about the way customers have changed and the way they might interact with their favorite brands or brands that want to target them?
Well, a lot of things. One is that they expect that businesses are digital first, and I think the thing about digital first is that we confuse it with digital transformation. So let's digitize a touch point. Let's have an app. Let's have an AI powered email system so that we can communicate with people at times that they want to be communicated with. What people are saying is that they want new ways to engage with you. They want you to reimagine your processes and even your standards for engagement in these new channels. They want you to create new products and services that meet their unmet needs and also their unknown needs. And by that, I mean, Their unmet needs are you don't engage me in the way that I'd like to. One way that is typical is when I check into a hotel, it is not an experience that a digital first customer is used to. I'll give you an example. One of the interesting things that happened with buy online, pick up in store, or curbside was that one, it every store had to have that, otherwise you weren't going to do business like every other business. And two, an example of how we become accidental narcissists is that once you have this experience, it's not good enough. It's never good enough. You want it to be better, faster, more convenient, more personalized. You want it to be dedicated to you. You want a parking space for you. You want a process when you walk into the store to pick up whatever it is that you're getting. You want signage. It's basically says, "Hey, Brian, over here." You want someone who caters to a digital first mindset to say, "Brian, thank you for shopping on through our app. Here's your product or good. Thank you. Please come again." And you want that whole process to be done. And I'm not kidding. This is the standard in 2 minutes. That that shift in mindset, the subconscious mindset, is how every single touch point that any business uses to engage a customer before travel, during travel, after travel has to be reimagined for this accidental narcissist. And all of that has changed in the last year.
Is there any going back to old behaviors, or do you think this is a point of no return that we've become so digitalized as a society?
It's funny you say that because I just traded in my iPhone for a rotary telephone. No, absolutely not. Once you taste something new, uh, it is the new standard. I'll give you a quick example. I used to study before the pandemic. How long was too long for you to wait for an Uber in the United States before you open the Lyft app? And the reason I used to study that every single year was to document how a digital first customer or a digital lifestyle changes you subconsciously to the point where you become insatiable, impatient, demanding. And that number dropped from 15 minutes to 5 minutes in New York over the course of several years. That if a car was further out than 5 minutes, you open the other app, because why would you wait more than 5 minutes for a car to come to you? And the the point is that that is true in every aspect. The other thing that I'll answer your other question on is that values have become first and foremost tremendous. We've had our uh, meaning of life moment. People really did think back to what's important to them in terms of friends, families, definitions of success, happiness, what they're going to do when they get outside, what kind of trips they're going to take, and that they are looking for businesses, hotels, travel companies, airlines to carry the same values. Also, they want them to play a societal role in this chaos that was the last few years of politics. Climate change is a real big deal to a lot of customers. They've
Yeah.
become quote unquote conscious, but I don't mean conscious like in a metaphysical way or conscious in a liberal way. I just mean they're much more mindful of the decisions that they're making because they have the tools to see their choices that are personalized for them. And then lastly, trust hit the number one issue this year as a result of the pandemic, that people want to know that they can trust your organization. So look, that combined with essentially being a more human company, right? Going back to the first question you asked, essentially they want businesses to be part of their society, a social business, a
Yeah.
human business, but they also want you to understand that they have changed. If you look at a teenager in high school and you give them a textbook like you and I had in school, there's no way their brain is going to comprehend that, because their brain has been rewired to be much more dynamic in how their favorite apps work. So we have to design for that brain. Every touch point, every policy, every process, that's what we're designing for, is a new type of customer who has been rewired unwittingly, if you've watched The Social Dilemma. And it's an opportunity to design experiences that are intuitive, that are native, and that are wonderful. And who doesn't want that? That's how
Is
we
there
live.
is there Brian, a sense that different generations are advancing quicker than others when we talk about behavior patterns around their consumption of digital content, or is really just there's no difference really now? There's been so many people of an older age group. I always reference my mother here, who'd never even heard of Zoom. She thought it was something that rockets did, and now she can't get off Zoom because she's talking to her friends all the time. The generations have kind of come closer together. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah, I'm trying to keep these big questions as brief as possible in my
That's fine.
response.
This is good.
Uh,
We'll keep going. It's okay.
in Before the pandemic, or before COVID, as BC as I call it, I studied what I call Generation C. The C stood for connected, and this was research that I had done many books ago when I was writing The End of Business as Usual. I had found that the hypothesis was that a digital first customer, and at the time it was somebody who used Facebook or Uber or Twitter, uh, Amazon, that they would go through the customer journey, whether that was travel, whether that was retail, whether that was buying a car, that they would go through the journey much differently than a traditional customer who might go through this linear funnel like we had been taught in school or in business all of these years. And indeed, the connected customer was much more dynamic. They came in and out. There was so many decision points that they would go through. And what's fascinating is that the lines blurred between demographics. It was always just sort of assumed, oh, well, that's just going to be millennials because they had iPads, and indeed it was. But if you were 35 or 45 and you were active on social media or digital and Amazon or Zappos, you became the same. You had the same expectations because essentially you were being conditioned to see a new world. With the pandemic, Generation C, my research at Salesforce, I published this at Fast Company and Forbes. You could read about this latest research. I
Mhm.
called it now Generation Novel, and it is the same premise, cross generational, in that you had to become digital first. So everybody who was living a digital lifestyle pretty much knew how to operate within a shelter in place world because they shopped online already, they communicated online, they knew what Zoom was. But now thrust forward everybody who had to learn all this stuff, right? It's not like they were saying, gosh, all of these conveniences are horrible. I want to go back to the way things were. They started to accelerate their behavior. But then you add the pandemic, the somatic marker, that it's a deep emotional bookmark, is visceral. We're never going to forget these times. We're never going to forget what an empty roll of toilet paper was like, or sanitizer now, or masks. So we're going to have these beholden times that changed our values, like we talked about earlier. Trust becoming more important, relationships becoming more important, values aligning becoming more important. So, for example, 31% of customers in since the pandemic have said they trust a business less as a result of how they treat employees and customers. And
Mm.
61% have stopped doing business with a company because their values are no longer in alignment. That's a big percentage. And last, with Generation Novel, why this is so important is that within the last year, 75% in the United States, and these are equivalent numbers all around the world, 75% of customers, according to McKinsey, have tried a new brand or service during this time,
Mm.
and they're going to stick with it. So this Generation Novel is the cross-generational psychographic to study in order to be successful in a post-pandemic economy.
I think what's so important about many of the things that you're talking about is that it may the touch point that so many brands have with their customer is primarily social media, because that's where the engagement comes from, which is why I think it's so interesting that you're referencing these on this particular event today. You've done some work with travel brands in the past. Sabre was one that I remember you did some work with them. Would you say that travel brands generally do a good job or not of just customer experience and engagement and those kind of elements?
I'd like to challenge travel brands to assume that they're not doing a good job. And
Right.
it's not to say that they're not. It's just that after spending this time studying Generation C and then also the rapid acceleration of Generation Novel, that they have to reimagine the entire customer journey. Everything from booking to check-in to the actual travel itself, to loyalty has to be completely reimagined now,
Yeah.
to personalization, to marketing, every touch point. And I want any travel brand listening, the word touch is in touch point, and that is a very human thing. And now that the customer is much more conscious. They are hyper aware of how you're touching them. Imagine if you have an incredible rash and someone keeps touching you in a way that is not comfortable. They are keen to it now. They've tasted other great experiences. You now compete with the best of the best in the experiential world. You compete against Apple, even though they're not in the travel industry. You compete against Amazon. And so that is what you have to reverse engineer. Your marketing, your customer service, your infrastructure for commerce. You need a cross-functional team that now has to start addressing these things in real time. What's broken? What needs to be fixed like right now? What do customers expect? How can we deliver that in the short term? And what are our longer term cross-functional strategies so that we could reimagine a brand for this new world? Because what's clear is that just because people are pent up in their homes and they want to get back out and it's going to look like, yes, travel is back, they are going to choose the companies that are most like them. And I can tell you right now that the C-suite is not their customer.
Yeah, interesting. So we've gone a couple of minutes over time here, but this is terrific. So I wanted to get one final thought from you, if we can, Brian. Let's imagine that we're both lucky enough, obviously, to be sitting here together in 12 months' time. What would you like travel brands to have achieved in the area of kind of customer service innovation and engagement, if there are some almost like a top 3 things that they should be considering right now?
Well, the top 3 things, number 1 is know what's important to your customer and be committed to fixing it, not trying to get back to normal, not trying to remove costs. I need you is your first step to embrace a mindset of preventing future disruption. Mm-hmm. Don't assume that the pandemic going away in 12 months. It's not, by the way. That's another conversation. But in 12 months, expect a customer-led disruption that's based on that McKinsey data that we talked about. So we have to know what's important to them. We have to compare that to the touch points that we offer today so that we're not pushing them away. We have to examine our service, not just as a reactionary weakest link in the customer journey touch point, but now as a proactive discovery touch point. So this is where automation and chatbots come in. In fact, service agents now can be retrained as customers are doing their research and they hit that chatbot. It's an agent on the other side of that when the chatbot can't continue that conversation. So agents now have to have the mindset and be empowered to, it's not how fast I can get them off this conversation. It's how can I help them feel like this is the right decision for them? So technology that gives agents that freedom and metrics that give agents that encouragement to do this type of work is going to be helpful on the bookends of service. And then experience innovation is where I would also look. Where are people experiencing friction today? And let's fix that. And let's compare ourselves to the best in the business so that we can deliver a wow in what I call an ignite moment. That ignite moment is where people feel like most of the time, those touch points with whatever business is, they suck. So when you deliver something good, it's going to stand out. And then the last thing is, where can you deliver a wow moment that you don't exhibit today? So just because the check-in process is what it is, and you have an app that allows you to choose a pillow, that's cool. But what is it that person really wants? That there was probably stress at the airport. There was probably stress in getting to the hotel, for example. Read an article or read my book X, or read an article in Fast Company from several years ago that talks about the Airbnb renaissance of how they use data to tell the story of the guest before they even ever arrived at the Airbnb property, and how they used a Disney storyboard artist to bring that story to life in ways that executives would say, wow, we never thought of that. And they changed their whole business as a result. That was when Airbnb went through that whole rebranding and became an experience company. A lot to learn there.
Okay. We're right up against time. So thank you so much. You've added some really interesting kind of big picture color to the conversations that we've been having in the sessions prior to this. So that was really great. So Brian Solis, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of PhocusWire Pulse. We really appreciate it, and stay well. I'll be back in a moment. Thank you.